Hey there, welcome to episode 122 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at just after 12:30 in the afternoon on Friday, June 27th, 2025. Today's topic and title, Yet Another Ecosystem Report. Yay. Calm down. If you've never heard or if you're not familiar with the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program, well, you're listening to it right now. The three names in the title, three words in the title, Cafe with two F's from Cafe Centro, a coffee shop, a place in San Francisco in the very pleasant and maybe even somewhat famous South Park, not to be confused with the cartoon or that other place. It's two words, South Park. It's an actual park located very near what is now the Oracle ballpark, used to be AT&T, maybe, well, during the time frame of reference here. Cafe Centro was where startups start, where famously Twitter got a start there, among others. Unfortunately, Cafe Centro did not survive for very long after the pandemic calamity, so the Cafe Centro memory will need to persist, and so we celebrate that a little bit with the use of the two F's, Cafe, in our title, and in fact in the Cafe Genius project or initiative, if you like. Cafe Genius from the Genius lunches that used to take place right here in Vegas during the days of the Downtown Project, connecting all manner of characters casually with an ad hoc lunchtime gathering. To talk about this, that, the other thing, what's up, what's down, the gossip, who's working on what, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. It's a great way, this ad hoc, sort of curated, mildly curated, quick, sort of agenda-light gathering. It's a great way to connect people who are pursuing their entrepreneurial endeavors. And I got to say, one of the strong points of it, and it did work, it worked great, just for connecting people that were of a similar bent. No focus on tech. There was no, are you working on the next unicorn? It was people pursuing entrepreneurial endeavors. I think we've lost sight of what a startup is because everybody thinks a startup has to be a tech startup with an app and many millions of dollars of funding and probably some AI at this point. Startups can take many forms. Finally, impresarios with two S's. The impresario is the person who's making things happen. Cafe Genius Impresarios. We did used to have interviews on this audio program, and we could again. I would look forward to that. In the meantime, this is an audio program aimed at impresarios. If there is not one speaking with me today or in any particular episode, one or two or however many. Cafe Genius Impresarios, here you are. Yet another ecosystem report. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which includes the show notes. Which contains the show notes, which includes a summary, which I'll read to you, and several links that are relevant for today's episode. 4 of the links are shameless self-promotion links for your host, yours truly, and then 3 links that are aimed at today's episode. So let's get to it so we can hit the weekend. I'm going to spoil this right up front. Another ecosystem study that does nothing but feed some notion that everything is fine en route to the next Silicon Valley, located right here in the global innovation hub that is our greater Vegas area. Yipes. We're doing it again. Okay. That's a little foreshadowing. The shameless 4. Remember, you're under no obligation to spend any money at any of these. buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, DANHUGO is always spelled like that in all these links. No spaces, DANHUGO. That's me. Buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo profile page has links to all of my audio programs, my various projects, some affiliate links for my favorite coffee beans from Amazon mostly, and a few other affiliate links on there. And don't forget some biographical information at the top of the profile page. It's kind of like a free-form link tree. And there is a link in there as well, right at the top, to buy me an update in the posts section, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo/posts. Buy Me an Update is a Monday program, 5 minutes or less, a quick rundown on the previous week's audio program topics and any news or announcements upcoming. Next up, coffee.com, Ko-fi.com, if you like, Ko-fi.com, C-O-M. The hyphen is next to the 0 on most keyboards that people listening to this audio program are using. It is ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo. Not so much on that profile page. However, the Coffee Solo audio program available at ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo/posts. You're seeing a pattern here, right? Coffee Solo has no particular schedule. It has no particular agenda. It's whatever comes up, whatever's on deck to chat about. There could be guests. Maybe there'll be a live stream sometime. Who knows? Who knows? Coffee Solo, check it out. I think I'm at about a dozen episodes so far. That's available on coffee.com. For now, both Buy Me an Update and Coffee Solo are available exclusively on their respective platforms, but I need to make that easier to get to. The Lindsay Report, the main topic of today's episode, is available at the unlv.edu website. Startup Ecosystems. Let me read the actual title. The Startup Ecosystem in Southern Nevada, Growth, Energy, and Emerging Entrepreneurship in 2025. And that's by Len Jessup. He's a fellow at the Lindsay Institute. That's Len Jessup, PhD. And Sean Curry, a student researcher at the Lindsay Institute. That's Lindsay, L-I-N-C-Y, which is at UNLV. The UNLV, the Lindsay Institute is the place. And it was published in June of this year. I think it was June 4th. Did they have the date in a convenient location? Yes, June 4th, 2025. So earlier this month, I only just heard about it last week. I think it was on Saturday that I first heard or saw a mention of it somewhere. So good to know that these things are floating around. As if you do read it, you will learn towards the end that talking about this ecosystem that is emerging, the growth and energy, nobody talks about that stuff. That's why it's so hard to find. I have a direct link to the PDF in the next link. It's a direct PDF link to the document, just in case, as was the case today, if you visit the Lindsay Report link, and it's kind of long, so I'll just say it's in the show notes. If you visit that link, it will point you to an abstract report page, and then from there you can download the PDF. So it has an abstract and some basic information about the document and the date and so on, and then a download link. Well, that page was unavailable today. So I was like, oh, okay, if the website is going to be broken, I'll put a link directly to the document. So it's still hosted on digitalscholarship.unlv.edu, and it's a sort of a page downloader. So it has a article parameter and a context parameter. So that'll bring you to a PDF of the document that you can download and read at your leisure. And finally, the EDAWN study, which is somewhat similar, although it was statewide. It split the state into Washoe County, Clark County, rural Nevada, and then the state as a whole. It was commissioned by and I don't remember, what does EDAWN stand for? I never, ever, ever remember. EDAWN. I think it's the Economic Development Agency of Western Nevada. Am I getting that right? I really should know this. Play some Jeopardy music. Oh, Economic Development Authority of Western Nevada. Okay, there you go. Authority. And in Southern Nevada, it's the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, and they're listed on the cover page of this document. This was published in April of 2023. The author of the study and this report is Mo Collins. We did an episode of this audio program when it came out, so in April of 2023. It was in the early days of this audio program, so I appreciated that Mo came on for part one. She has since moved on to like a national entrepreneurial ecosystem development effort. Probably doesn't have time for me, but I did send her a link to this document for the new report from the Lindsay Institute. There are some similarities, strangely enough, even though it's been published 2 years later. I will say right up front, though, as I kind of already have, not totally stoked by this one. It has some of the same issues that I have brought up about the EDAWN-sponsored report by Mo Collins. It's not an indictment in any way of the people involved. It's just that I think the methodology is a little bit detached And I think there's some selection bias and some other issues that come into play when you're surveying the people on the ground, and there's a lot of positivity. Like if I say something negative, it will become true. So I just think I have some concerns about the way such a report would be determined. I'm going to liken it to asking people, what do you think of the weather in Vegas? And some people will say, oh, it's too hot. But a lot of people will point out that it's not that hot. And it's only hot in July, or it's only hot in the summer. And, oh, the monsoons, they're not as bad as some other places. And so they kind of mitigate some of their concerns. And to be honest, it is not that hot because I grew up in Phoenix. So it's a matter of perspective. I also worked for almost 15 years in Silicon Valley, the real one. So when I talk about Vegas, my views, my opinions, some of the insights I might bring to bear are most definitely forged in the fires of Silicon Valley. So there is a matter of perspective, and I believe that is lost in the way that this and the previous report from 2023, the way that they are constructed, or that they're compiled, I guess, with interviews and interactions and interpretations, and then they are presented and analyzed. They're presented with some analysis. I think the process and the publication filter out any sort of nuance. And I think a lot of nuance is important in the early days of the formation of an ecosystem if it's going to be a change from the status quo, which this most definitely would be. At the same time, I want to point out, because some people do ask me about this, I am not suggesting that there is no entrepreneurialism, that there is no innovation, that there is no that there's no entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. Of course there is. Of course there are all those things. The question is scale, right? Most places they have entrepreneurs. They have people that are creating their own businesses. Not every place is going to be New York or LA or the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. We could make Vegas a skiing destination because we have Mount Charleston, but it's not going to be the same as some of the skiing that you would find in Aspen or some, Utah, Colorado. We don't have those resources. But we do have skiing. Some people will say, we're going to be the next Silicon Valley. And I always say, could Silicon Valley be the next Las Vegas? And I usually get laughs. No, that's crazy. Well, Silicon Valley, by the way, does have a pronounced food and beverage scene. It has some card houses and gaming in general. It has professional sports. It has theater and culture. It has tremendous amounts of tourism, not quite like Vegas, but has tourism, and it has a thriving economy. California being what it is, it's pretty substantial. There are a lot of things about California and about the Bay Area in particular that you would say, well, maybe it could be the next Vegas, but not really. So you can have the parts, but how do you assemble them? The sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, as the saying goes. So that is my viewpoint before we get into this too much. So here we are, the same report. It's a different year. I've included the EDAWN sponsored report, which I just mentioned again, that I've spent some time on in the previous episodes of this program, including a conversation with its author, Mo Collins, way back when, in April 2023. Since this new report is fairly similar with regard to the Southern Nevada ecosystem, quote unquote, I'm starting to wonder if ecosystem is used either too often or not quite correctly. There is no strong need to go back in time, so I'm not going to do a deep dive on some of the same things that I've already talked about. So suffice to say that there's a lot of similarity. And when I say ecosystem is overused, I think it's a perfect term, but some people will believe, for example, that you can build an ecosystem. And if you take the ecosystem term and use it as you would with a biological ecosystem, for example, which is, ecological reference, you cannot convert the Sahara Desert to a rainforest by sprinkling money on top of it. Now, you could sprinkle all of the money, and you might be able to do that. But guess what? When you stop sprinkling that money, the climax community of the Sahara Desert is the Sahara Desert. So you cannot make fundamental, dramatic, and physics-defying changes to an ecosystem on on the biological or the ecology front without substantial cost and maintenance. And I think that's sometimes lost when we just wave a wand and say, oh, we're just going to build an ecosystem. I don't think it's not a perfect analogy to the biological, the science of ecology and its use of the term ecosystem. But I think it's pretty close, and it's closer than people might imagine. Look up Climax Community. I've talked about that at length in this, at least 1 or 2 episodes of this audio program series. So Climax Community, and the other one is, I always forget the other one. It'll come to me. Anyway, rest assured, though, this new report from the Lindsay Institute at UNLV is basically saying the same things in both status quo summary and recommendations. And I've addressed these at length from the April 2023 report and in general across more episodes of this very program than I can count. So I'm not going to deep dive into this report since I've already done that. And there are enough similarities that I don't think that's really essential. So rest assured, they are similar enough that I'm not going to spend a lot of time rehashing. Again, you can flip through several episodes. If I ever have a guest on with regard to this report, maybe the student who probably wrote most of it would be interested in having a conversation, then I will point that person to those episodes ahead of time, and we can collect specific references and have that conversation. But in the meantime, there it is. It almost came to me. There are 2 ecological terms that really cross over nicely into an economic ecosystem. Climax Community and it'll come to me. I've talked about this in previous episodes, so all I have to do is remember. I suppose one take home at the outset is 2 years later, so April 2023, June 2024, obviously the preparation took place prior. If I remember the April report, the study engagements with people, interviews and conversations and whatnot began in January of 2023 or so. Here in Southern Nevada, I don't know if I don't know if Washoe County got focused at a different time frame. May have been in parallel, not sure. But the take home from the outset, 2 years, reports similar sources with similar pieces of information and probably relies on the interviews or other interactions with a similar group of people, which I'll remind you is likely littered with selection bias, as the previous study also had. The recommendations are similar, as though there is a common set of seeds to plant in an ecosystem to give it a shot. And by the way, I remembered the other term is carrying capacity. How many of something can you carry in an ecosystem to not put it in danger, not to detriment? If you have too many, if you have the Sahara Desert and you try to plant a bunch of trees in an oasis, you can only have so many trees. If you try to plant too many trees, first of all, they probably won't survive. So it has a certain number of trees that can be supported in the ecosystem as it is. If you try to alter the carrying capacity or the Climax Community, you're going to require energy, you're going to require maintenance, you're going to require huge expenditures, and you may throw things out of whack, so to speak, out of balance. So carrying capacity, I've talked about these, and we'll probably talk about them again in some form in the future. But the Climax Community here is probably most important. Now, the carrying capacity of the startup scene here in Vegas, if I can get ahead of myself a little bit, how many bars can exist in general in the Las Vegas economy? Well, plenty. How many casinos? A lot. How many hotel rooms? 155,000 is working so far. We'll see. If the demand stays up, if it goes down a little bit, there'll be some empty rooms. How many startups can we have? Probably more than we actually have, etc. Right? So how many of something can an ecosystem support without becoming parasitic? Right? Can we be symbiotic? Obviously, some people will lose. There'll be some capitalism and competition, right? So whoever gets the money and whoever wins the market and whatever, et cetera, et cetera. So we can leave that there for the moment. But yeah, the Climax Community, I think, is worth considering right up front. Can you convert something that has been for 100 years one way into another way in the space of a year or two? No. So here's a quick review For those who have not heard all of my previous episodes, this is the very quick, very brief. It's not comprehensive by any means. So I don't want to spend an hour rehashing what I've talked about so many times across so many episodes of this program. So I'll try to keep it brief. As I said, as the fiscal year comes to an end, we're all busy. Monday is going to be busy for everybody, of course. So very briefly, to get started, my 4 pillars of the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem include talent and education. These are the people who make it go. So my 4 pillars can be broken up in more granular form, and many people do. I've seen, I think it was Bambi Francisco had, I think it was 8 pillars of a startup city, or she was considering Oakland. She came and gave a presentation at the Downtown Project one time. So talent and education is one pillar. Culture and community, those people need to speak, share, and support. They need to have the notion that these are important. That's part of that culture. And yes, community, if you've ever heard my episodes before, I think community is an overused word. It carries a lot of weight. I don't think it does a good job of doing that, but culture and community for what they are worth. Government infrastructure, regulations, foundational systems. Somebody's got to make the roads. Somebody's got to put the fiber optics or the phone, or enable the phone lines, the internet, the regulations, and of course, any tax incentives or tax abatements or any other things. That's something that a government can do that most private companies could not do in quite the same way. So government infrastructure is definitely a part of an entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. And of course, the final, access to capital. It's the stuff that makes the world go round. It's the number one thing you hear from people in my canvas as far as the Silicon Valley. What am I thinking? The greater Vegas region for startups and entrepreneurs is we need more access to capital. We just need more. I usually make the culture of innovation an orthogonal component, the y-axis of the ecosystem x-axis, if you like. But culture and community are critical on their own. So I do run into a sort of a definition problem of sorts, kind of mixing the culture of innovation with culture and community as an element of the ecosystem. So putting them on a pair of axes becomes slightly problematic if we become overly pedantic, but we'll deal with it. I think it does need to be treated as a special case, culture, because it is something that cannot be built. It sort of evolves, it emerges over time. Education can be turned up to 11. A talent pool can be developed over time or imported or both. You can outsource. Government can do what it can do, given enough time in politics and, of course, overspending. Access to capital happens when there is reason for capital to become more available. If this was a thriving startup scene, there would be no capital access problems. So it's a chicken and egg sort of thing, but if you build it, they will come, to quote a movie, Field of Dreams. Entrepreneurial innovation culture needs to be cultivated over time. It's emergent, and it takes time. It is not easily transplanted, if that's even possible at all. And like the overused community, the C word, no, not that one, this one, community, it is often presumed to exist, or that building a community, I'm building community, I'm a community builder. We assume that it's possible, but rest assured it is not. Community and culture emerge over time. You can help put the pieces in place. The example I always give here, because I think it is pretty much spot on, in my opinion. If you locate a wheat farm, it could be anything, but wheat works good. Is the farmer who's running that farm, farming that farm, is that farmer growing wheat? Or is the wheat growing wheat? The wheat is growing itself. The farmer is making sure the field is healthy, nutrients, free of weeds and parasites, tilling, turning over topsoil, all of the things that enable the wheat to do what it does, which is grow. So you can be a farmer and you are providing the platform for the wheat to grow. Similarly, you can provide the pieces that make a culture fit, and it will emerge over time, or it won't. One element of that cultivation process, and an essential component on its own, of course, is the focus of education and the educational milieu providing the tools and environment for the aspiring and even nascent entrepreneurs of any age, bored in class right now. They're bored right now as I'm speaking, although school oh no, school's over. Summer school kids. But at any given time, there are kids, there are young people in classrooms that are thinking, I have a cool idea. I wish I could be spending my time on that. How to transform their notions into implementation, whether viable or not. So that process itself, the entire thing, converting a notion to an implementation, and the knowledge that this is possible, are a fundamental part of learning. They should be. It starts at about age 12, 7th grade, usually, and it's about a decade of runway ahead of it. This process and the learning and it could be, there are some sprinters out there. There are some young people that start their own business when they're 12 or 10 or 7. Those are the outliers. You cannot base your entire future on this kid I know. But if you step back a little bit, junior high school, young people just begin to switch classes. They're able to take electives. Maybe they're participating more in external sporting events, extracurricular activities, hobbies, study groups, different tiers of different types of classes. Maybe you're taking a math class that's more advanced or later in the timeline than your friends are taking, etc. So right around 7th grade, right around age 12 is when we start to see some possibilities, not only in the infrastructure that we have and the way it's deployed, but in the students themselves. There's something, age 12 is about when it starts to kick in, this neuroplasticity, perhaps. It's important. This has to be included in the conversation. And it is in this report. There is reference to aligning education with future goals and whatnot. What are those going to be? I think there's a push to make artificial intelligence a strength, a focus area for the Southern Nevada region as a global innovation hub, where battery technology, energy storage, thanks to the huge lithium mine determined at the McDermott Calvera up in Washoe area. So, we have all this lithium. We should probably turn it into deployable technologies, and that's great. So sometimes the conditions dictate the direction. But here in Southern Nevada, I think it's wrong to consider we're a global innovation hub. And here's the thing we're working on. If you're a global innovation hub, the people doing the innovating are going to tell you what they're working on. You're not going to tell them. So we'll see how that turns out. The startup scene. I'm less and less a fan of that use of that phrasing. I've referred to this previously in at least 2 entire episodes of this audio program, in fact. But in general, my concerns about the efficacy of our so-called startup scene are, I think, real. I have 2 main problems with this notion as it is. The startup scene, let me look at something here. Did I skip over something? Oh, I did. Yeah, I totally skipped a whole section. Let me back up a little bit. We'll touch on the startup scene in a moment. I only skipped 1 block of 3 bullet items, so we're fine. Just got a little bit of a. I just started by skipping over. Okay, not going to edit that out. We'll leave it in. That's reality. Status quo again. Okay, the report. So we're talking about the report and how it's kind of a repeat of what we already had, what was already reported on in the April report. The studies and the reports are all kind of going over the same status quo, so they're looking the same on the output when the report is presented. The report weighs in at 27 pages from the title page to the acknowledgments page at the end, with some charts and tables that are probably more useful than the filler text, if I'm being honest. How about a quick skim over the abstract, and we can jump into some of the content. So let me pull up that abstract page right there. So the abstract of this document, and again, it's by Len Jessup, PhD. He's a fellow at the Lindsay Institute, Lincy, Lindsay Institute, and Sean Curry, S-E-A-N, Curry with 2 R's, C-U-R-R-Y, a student researcher with the Lindsay Institute. I believe he's studying economics at UNLV. I've never spoken to either of these people. I'm connected to Len Jessup on LinkedIn recently. The abstract, I'll skim over it in real time. I didn't prepare like a summary of it. It's too long to read the entire thing. The startup ecosystem in Southern Nevada has undergone significant transformation during the past decade, maybe, evolving from a fragmented and nascent environment. Nascent is a good word. I use it all the time. Nascent environment. I don't know if an environment can be nascent. Evolving from fragmented and nascent environment into a dynamic and increasingly coordinated landscape. When you reach the end of this paper and you read through the recommendations, you'll find that that's increasingly is doing a lot of work there. Coordinated is doing way more work, and it's probably not completely accurate. This study examines the growth of the Southern Nevada startup ecosystem, which I don't like the use of startup because it implies too much about the focus of entrepreneurial efforts. Analyzing key components such as funding sources, incubators, accelerators. It's not really great to break those apart. And public-private collaborations. So those are, it's not a great sentence. Utilizing both quantitative and qualitative data, including investment trends, economic impact reports, and interviews with over 100 stakeholders. That's not enough. This policy brief provides, and it's not enough because of selection bias. I'm going to wager that several of the people, and I think I mentioned this later, I think I wrote it down, several of the 100 people here were also interviewed in the April report because of warm introductions, because you always start with the same people, the same names, and they do thank Zach Miles, for example. So if you're going to start with Zach Miles, you're going to end up talking to Jamie Schwartz and Bo Bernard, and you're going to start talking to people that they know, and they're going to recommend you definitely got to go talk to this person and that person. And so warm introductions introduce a tremendous amount of selection bias. And because all those people already know each other and they always talk and they always show up to the same events and they already know the same things and the same people and so on, you're going to get the same output. And guess what? Your report will look very similar to the previous report. See how that works? This policy brief, stakeholders. Policy brief provides a comprehensive assessment of the strengths and gaps within the ecosystem. I don't believe that's true. It looks like I'm going to read the whole abstract. Key findings indicate that while the region has made substantial progress, particularly in fostering early stage investments and building the infrastructure to support startups, I disagree. Challenges remain, including the need to strengthen cross-sector communication. This is absolutely true, and I'll touch on this later. Develop deep local venture capital. This is just access to capital, so great. It doesn't have to be local, but sure. And broaden awareness of available resources. This goes back to communication, so discovery and communication. The study also benchmarks Las Vegas against other Mountain West metro areas, highlighting opportunities for further growth, and includes policy recommendations aimed at strengthening the region's ability to attract, develop, and retain high-growth startups. So here again, you're focusing absolutely on tech startups and high growth. So they have to be high dollar, they have to attract a lot of revenue, and they also have to attract local employees, because you really got to have local employees to boost the local economy. Sometimes we call that gentrification, and you end up pricing out your fun economy enablers, the people who are working here now, and you'll raise the cost of living and so on and so on. And if you need an example, look at Austin, which, by the way, is not a Mountain West metro area, nor is Silicon Valley, nor is Los Angeles, nor are places like Seattle or Hillsboro, Oregon. The list continues. So there's a select list of Mountain West areas that are not the top tier startup areas. Silicon Valley, I did a whole episode on the fact that Utah and Arizona are better contenders to have the next Silicon Valley, especially Arizona, which already has silicon production. They actually have chip fabs thanks to Intel and now TSMC and previously Motorola, Honeywell, the list goes on. So yeah, the devil's in the details. With targeted efforts in ecosystem coordination, investment, expansion, and strategic alignment with emerging industries, Southern Nevada has the potential to become a more robust and sustainable hub for entrepreneurship and innovation. Two great tastes that go great together. I don't disagree with this, but I think it's a question of scale or maybe amplitude. There can be a lot of entrepreneurship and innovation, and a lot of it could be taking place in the greater Vegas area. I think a sustainable hub could give way to destination. I think Nevada could lean all the way into its fun economy and its capacity for visitors. And hey, guess what? If tourism is going down right now, but if we had a direct focus on enabling and encouraging entrepreneurs and innovators to converge on the Greater Vegas area frequently for what we might call innovation sprints or other team activities of an otherwise remote or distributed workforce, to collaborate across different entities with companies and whatnot. Trade shows, conventions are examples of this, but you can be much more focused. The example I always give here is the Intel Sales and Marketing Conference. When I was working with Intel, every year they would bring all their sales and marketing people, it's right there in the name, to Vegas from around the world. And they would spend, I think it was a week, 5 days, 6 days. They had rooms at the Venetian. The executives had rooms at the Palazzo Suites. And they would spend a week learning about new products, new marketing strategies, new ad campaigns, et cetera, et cetera. And then they would return to where they came from. We didn't have to have people from Intel move to Vegas. When I was working for Intel, I was the only one in Nevada. So you don't need that to benefit from it. I always say, do people move to Vegas to go to an F1 race or to see the Super Bowl? No, you come here, you conduct your business, you add to our economy, and you leave. So while I think the diversification notion is completely fair, it's not a bad idea at all. I don't think the low-hanging fruit approach is going to work. That's my prediction. You can write it down. I would recommend reading over by the first 4 pages of this document, by the way. Read them in their entirety. It's a good read. It provides some backup information. The next page, page 5, is basically the financial roadmap for startups. That might be interesting, but the first 4 pages, I definitely suggest reading. I'm not going to read all of them. I ended up reading the whole abstract, so that's sorry to bore you. There are some descriptions in the prose of this report concerning sources of capital, accelerator and incubator programs, some entrepreneurial success stories, a less expansive focus on the ESOs, entrepreneur support organizations in general, and some tables which summarize a lot of the ESO situation, which, by the way, has not changed much in the last 2 years between reports. There are a couple of new things, but I don't think they're completely effective. There are a lot of show, a lot of sizzle, not as much steak, I think. It remains to be seen. It's only been 2 years, but at the same time, it has been 2 years. 2 years in internet time is a lifetime. 2 years in semiconductor development is one more cycle. So 18 months doubles the compute power. There's a couple of different ways of interpreting that in the modern era, but it was basically transistor counts and all that. But in 18 months, there should have been a substantial, if you're following Moore's law, which you don't have to. I'm just saying that 2 years is a long time, and a lot of stuff could have happened, and I don't think it has. Maybe it has, and we just don't know about it because discovery and communication are not strong points. So there are descriptions, read the first 4 pages, ESO situation. Let us go through some of the tables with some highlights. So I'm going to summarize the ESO tables because I'm not going to read more. Yeah, I really didn't intend to read the entire abstract. But so if you scroll down to page, there it is. It's in the appendix, I think. Yeah, the appendix starting on page 21. Components of the Southern Nevada startup ecosystem. So these are entrepreneur support organizations of one form or another. Accelerator/incubator. Now, I think these could have been, because they're broken up separately elsewhere, I think these could have been broken up and not grouped together. Some issues I have, Startup NV and Startup Vegas are listed as 2 separate things, but they're actually merged. It should also be pointed out that Startup Vegas was co-founded by Peter Tomasic, who's mentioned here as a local fan favorite for as a serial entrepreneur. Good for Peter. Startup NV has some other programs, Accelerate NV, Incubate NV, and so on. So I think it's kind of a hand wave or oversimplification. Generator, I don't know how strong Generator is. I've tried to reach out to some people there. Got off to a weird start. And I really think if you look at the, Startup NV and Startup Vegas are merged. So that's one. Generator in Las Vegas and their G Beta program. So that's 2. They don't get much attention, but that's, again, the communication and the discovery problem. Zero Labs and the UNLV Innovation Launchpad I submitted my startup idea for an innovation launchpad event, which is starting next weekend, July 5 through 7, 5, 6, 7, 3 days. I had my interview end of May sometime. I was told I would hear back as soon as possible whether I was in or out, and I've never heard from them again. I wouldn't participate anyway. So this is my editorial. I'm not impressed in the slightest with Zero Labs and the UNLV Innovation Launchpad, so I would not participate in that, but hey, it's listed, so great. Roseman University Incubator is a biotech incubator. There is a desire to make the greater Vegas area, among all of its many personalities, personae, it wants to be a biotech hub, research and development, all things biotech, biomedical, etc. Great. Is there nothing we cannot do? Business development, they list Urban Chamber of Commerce, Nevada Business Opportunity Fund, Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance. I would not list Global Economic Alliance as a business development element of the startup ecosystem. I just wouldn't. That's not what they're good at. They really want big companies to come here, so they will pretend that they want small companies to come here, but I think it's disingenuous to include them in this list. NV Grow is another business development. Totally not familiar with that. Their events, this is by far the weakest part of this. If you can list all of and this is the largest part, this is huge. Higher education is also large. Okay, higher education is larger, but the events are not, they're like the napkins and silverware of your startup ecosystem. They're not, Tech Alley, Vegas Tech Summit, which is horrible. The Vegas Tech Summit is actually kind of an insult. Promise Startup Conference, not impressed. Scared to Scale. There was a point when Jeff Sailing from Startup NV posted somewhere and said, I'm not really sure if this is a real thing. So Scared to Scale. Ugh. Fusion 42 is ridiculous. Fusion 42 had a startup celebration event of some sort. Same people that have been around for years, aspiring and nascent startups that are not actually getting anywhere. Where are the startups? By the way, here's a hint. Real startups, they're too busy for this stuff. Startup Champions Network, I think I've heard about this. Techstars, Startup Weekend, great, very poorly promoted. Pitch Mayhem, I just heard about this. I think that's also a Fusion 42 event. So listing them as separate is sort of disingenuous also. Gathering of Angels, kind of like Scared to Scale. I think that has a little bit more oomph behind it, a little bit more credibility. Level Up, Link Up, Scale Up, these are Startup Vegas events. So to put them as 3 separate events pads out your list, but it's disingenuous again. Nevada Governor's Office of Economic Development, okay. The GOED, great. That's kind of its own thing, its own beast. City of Las Vegas Innovation District and International Innovation Center. The International Innovation Center is usually empty, at least the first one. The second one is mostly office space. I don't know what's going on in there. Very difficult, completely opaque, not really exciting. The Innovate.Vegas website is well out of date, doesn't really get any love whatsoever. Clark County Innovation District is a work in progress, because when you already have one innovation district, why not build another one? That way you'll have 2 underutilized districts. Nevada Apex Accelerator, I've barely heard about that. The President's Innovation Challenge, that's a good one. I would love to know more about what UNLV is, or our educational infrastructure is doing in general. So that one's UNLV hosted. Toro University has a higher education focus. Nevada State, Fred and Harriet Cox Senior Design Competition. No idea. The Blackstone Launchpad. So and the list goes on and on. So I'll let you read through these. There's investment possibilities. Angel NV, Fund NV. Here again, these are all they're tied to Startup NV. So it's this 1864 fund is overseen by Startup NV. VTF Capital is a throwback to the Downtown Project and Vegas Tech Fund. Is that really still going strong? Battleborn Ventures is for UNLV Ventures. So it's kind of like from my understanding, it's more of like an on-ramp for venture funding. I don't know. Yeah, they say they invest in Nevada companies. I know it's student run with some mentor sort of chaperones, I guess. I don't know how eager they are to fund non-university sourced startups. And finally, Startup Grind Las Vegas. I would be hard pressed to know where a Startup Grind event was still going in a useful way here. Startup Grind really caught on during the downtown project. And of course, Tech.Vegas, which is called networking. It's a WordPress website that does a ridiculously horrible job of sharing and communicating information about what's happening. It's also focused on tech, which is stupid. So, I know my overly editorialized rundown. I have strong opinions. A lot of the verbiage in this report is about funding sources, access to capital. These are important things. Do we need to have more local access to capital, or is general access to capital good? I have talked to some VCs over the years. There's always the strings attached, and those strings pull you towards Menlo Park, towards Sand Hill Road. They really want you to be close to where they're located. So from that perspective, sure, you want to have a local presence. So your funding source or sources has proximity. It's also probably healthy if they are a part of the local ecosystem, so they understand the resources that are available, gaps, where things are headed, and so on. So they can check the weather by being in the weather, so to speak. So I can understand that. But a lot of the document concerns access to capital and so on. So yes, you could, in fact, I would suggest that a more comprehensive separate report could have been written about access to capital and really dive into some of the opportunities and growth and a little bit more granular look at where investments are going and so on. Peter Tomasi gets a lot of attention for his levels of investment across his various startups over the years. We should point out that 100% of influential funding was from external sources, not within the state. That was what motivated him to be a part of this Startup.Vegas effort to try to encourage more local investment. But it should be noted, more local investment, not necessarily in local startups. So there's some disconnect, there's some nuance that I think is often overlooked or hand waved away. So I would like to see a lot more of a deep dive in this sort of stuff rather than like, ooh, if I list every single thing in this table, my table will be bigger. So yeah. Why is Deal Room still a reference, by the way? Is it reliable at all? This was also present in the April 2023 report. The references to Deal Room as far as numbers and startups and funding and so on. I believe Deal Room is maintained by Startup NV, and I don't think it was maintained well. Hopefully that has changed over the last 2 years. When I last looked at it 2 years ago, it was a train wreck. Generally not well regarded as far as quality and accuracy of the data included. So still showing up as a reference. There's a lot of old info on that site the last time I looked, and there's a lot of stuff also referred to that I think there could be a lot more veracity, not so much opaque. I'm going to get into opacity in a second, but some of the stuff that's pulled out, like, oh, we need something that shows that we're number one in pre-IPO financial activity. Oh, there's that article from 2023 that, sure, that works. We just won't mention some of the caveats. And it turns out the author of that article was invited in a virtual call-in to participate in one of the what was it called? The ecosystem breakfast or something. There was a meetup in the Innovation Center every 2 months, I think it was. And so they had that guy on, and we'll get to that in a second, but I don't talk about the fact that the author was in. But yeah, they didn't cover Silicon Valley. Like, Vegas was not put up against Silicon Valley in this ranking. So it's important to understand, first of all, we were number one of the number two group. We're not number one against Austin and Vegas and so on. I'm sorry, Silicon Valley and so on. Perhaps the most interesting bits of data are found in the two charts. There are 3 charts at least, but there are 2 charts I found interesting. The chart with the unicorn stuff, like let's drop the unicorn stuff. We are way too early. The red bar chart showing private capital investment on page 11, illustrating a bit of a dip in 2023 and 2024, like a noticeable dip. And the total valuation of startups on page 12, illustrating some stagnation over the last 4 years. The graphs, the bars in the bar chart on page 12 They look, oh, look, they're big, but the range from this, the starting range of the y-axis is kind of small. I think it's what, $15 million. So I'm not looking at it at the moment. Let me pull that up. Page 12. There we go. The full range is 20 million, but the range of values of the bars go from 1.9 million in 2014 to 19 million. So it's a 17.1 million range over 10 years. That's just not a lot of, like, this is not explosive. This is not the kind of stuff you take home. And now, of course, the pandemic took place in 2020. So strangely enough, 2020 is when there's a spike from 5.5 million in 2019 to 14.7 million in 2020. And then 2021, a little dip down to 12.8, and then basic recovery to 17.1 to 19 million over 2022 to 2024. The take home is this: these are not huge fluctuations. They're not big spikes and boosts, and we're not seeing a big elbow where suddenly everybody says, Silicon Valley really is showing up in Vegas all of a sudden. And here we are. We're going to start dropping a ton of money and high value startups and whatnot. Is high value startup the measurement that we should be making? I don't think so, but my opinion. Post-pandemic times have been something of a challenge, and certainly the pandemic itself has been something of a change driver to diversify the economy of Southern Nevada, where the fun economy, which was recently trademarked and still a vastly more visible piece of the puzzle. So on the one hand, we want to participate in economic change and diversification that will put the fun economy at risk through gentrification. But on the other hand, the fun economy is king, and we love it, and it's resilient, and it's the reason people come to Vegas, the reason we have such a vibrant destination city. The fun economy and the economy as was stalled rather substantially without visitors to our oasis, something we may be seeing creeping in again with the current economic situation at large, although one would hope not as severe. So the fun economy is not to be ignored, but I would wonder if it should also be treated gingerly, or should we just gentrify the whole thing and be done with it? Okay, now we're on to the startup scene. I have referred to this previously in at least 2 entire episodes of this program, in fact, but in general, my concerns about the efficacy of our so-called startup scene are, I have 2 main problems. The startup scene is a lot of aspiration and nascence. A great many people consider showing up for startup scene events, and there's a whole table of them in the report in the appendix, is checking their own box. They are a part of the scene. Yay, celebration. We should be seeing far more activity just in the last 2 years between these reports. We should be seeing more than we have seen. If we are indeed this thriving global innovation hub, so where is the pool of startups which have launched over the last 2 years? Shouldn't we be seeing more startups? We should be seeing more startups, but possibly also more failures. That's okay too. And where are the failures? If this is a healthy startup ecosystem, not every startup wins. So we should be learning about the failures so that we can avoid them or make the ecosystems, the people in the ecosystem stronger and more informed, more resilient. They should understand when they're heading into trouble, when to pivot and so on. We're not seeing enough failure. Yeah, where are the startups? Do they exist? I've heard that they exist, but they do exist, right? So where are they? And again, if you're a real entrepreneur, you're really in what I like to call the second startup scene. The second startup scene is people who are actually working on their startups, not showing up at a free lunch event every month to talk about their startups or to sit in a classroom setting and wait to pull the trigger someday. People in the second startup scene are too busy, and we may never hear from them. They're doing their thing. The notion of a startup scene focuses on tech startups, unfortunately, and local startups in general, right? Tech startups might form anywhere. I have gone on at length suggesting that Greater Vegas as an innovation destination makes a lot more sense and takes full advantage of our fun economy. By the way, that is trademarked UNLV Office of Economic Development. And as well, with so many varied and well-attended trade shows and conventions, not to mention general visitor numbers around 40 million annually, these mean a lot of people who might experience a lot of things while they are here do not necessarily need to experience a unicorn. So, when I said tech startups and local startups. So in my view, a local startup doesn't have to be a tech startup, but they can be local. And a tech startup doesn't need to be local. Maybe they would like cutting edge visitor experience when they're here for a trade show, which might include the latest innovations in food, beverage, transportation. And by the way, we do have a self-driving vehicle presence here, not necessarily developed here, but certainly showcased here. Hospitality and hospitality innovation, of course, accessibility, and the list goes on. Some tech and tech adjacent, but which entrepreneurial innovation efforts are not considered startups here? I think there are too many. I think too much focus is placed on tech startups. A startup equals tech startup. Does that have to be the case? If we're a truly innovation-driven economy, we could be innovative in the way we use those terms. This report wades into some of the usual bits of knowledge, but stays very much on the shallow end of the pool, in my opinion. At this point, the main, except for the access to capital, it goes into more deep depth there. And again, I think that could have been a separate paper. At this point, the main reason to refer to Tony Hsieh and the downtown project is in the form of a retrospective examination to make use of lessons learned from that time frame, rather than simply referring to those as anchors, as historical references and something that we should all be shaking our head. Oh, yes, Tony Hsieh and yes, startups. It was wonderful. Really. And that's not anti-Tony. That's whether or not we can learn something rather than simply accepting it was brilliant. Some things were. So the main thing to refer to that is for retrospective examination to make use of the lessons learned from that time frame on the very same footprint and with some of the same people then as now. So rather than looking back wistfully, oh yes, back then, we can say, let's look at actually what worked and what didn't back then, because it's in the same place. We can compare this area to other areas, but we can also compare this area to the same area in a different time frame, and not that long ago, 5 to 10 years ago. There's far too much reliance on anecdote, old and maybe opaque data, generally accepted truisms that may not actually be true. The halo effect, of course. Once everybody loves you, you can't do wrong, even if you do, which is huge. The halo effect is huge here. And many more weaknesses of assumption visible in this report. We know this is an issue because, to put too fine a point on it, we see the same names and events over and over again, almost like the scene is stagnant, maybe waiting for something. If you talk to the same 100 people, you're going to hear the same 100 things to list in the table, etc. Coming upon this report was the result of a mention by someone in the so-called startup scene, excited by excited by words like growth and emerging entrepreneurship in the title. Did they read it? I'm going to bet my $1 that they did not. Maybe not. Headlines are so much easier than the pages of text and charts and whatnot hiding under them. But it is important, maybe critical, to know and understand that having a couple of success stories is a great thing, but does not make everybody successful. How often have you been involved in the classic college is unnecessary discussions, especially lately, where the fact that Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of college and they did okay? Yes, they did. With some caveats about their impact on other people. But, and of course, statistically, shouldn't the world be full of billionaires? Many more than there are now, of college dropouts who went on to be soul-crushing and world-destroying billionaires? Yes, they did, with some caveats on their impact on other people. I'm not really anti-billionaire. I think it's unreasonable to have so much money in one person's control, but it's capitalism. But this sort of motivated reasoning and confirmation bias leaves out an awful lot of reality. I suggest this happens with reports like this one, and most definitely with the people who see the report and may not actually read it. They post it on LinkedIn, and everybody likes it and applauds and makes comment, oh, this is brilliant, thanks for sharing. They don't read it. Nobody read the 2023 report either. I did. To paraphrase a talented, competitive, extemporaneous speaker friend of mine from years ago, in high school, ecosystem reports are like a bikini. What they reveal is interesting. What they conceal is vital. 2 more sections. Opacity. Opaque, can't see through it. One of the issues I have with both of the reports I've referenced today, 2023 and this one, is that the analysis and presentation are performed on aggregates, especially with regard to individual contributions of opinion or interview response or whatever outreach was performed. My concern with the so-called startup scene in the greater Vegas area, it suffers from groupthink, maybe an overly enthusiastic embrace of motivated reasoning. If we talk about it enough, it must be true. And the components we have around us of our ecosystem are great, maybe based on little practical knowledge and experience from other places. I mean, there's an Eddie Murphy joke concerning crackers. And if you're really, really hungry, any cracker is as good as a Ritz cracker. This is not awful, but it is important to know what we have, what we need, and why, and how we get there, not simply say we're already there. I don't think we are. The charts do their job. They're interesting to look at. I would suggest another 10 pages could be spent breaking those down with specific details and some analysis of those details, especially if we are concerned with and focusing on, in this report, growth, including the hows and the whys. I questioned some of the references as well, including Deal Room, which I will point out again may be out of date. It's generally disappointing, and other externals such as the crowdfund, whatever that periodical was. It's in the report. I don't want to go back to that. A crowdfund assertion from 2 years ago, 2023, that Las Vegas led the way in pre-IPO activity, financial activity. It's referenced on page 11 of this report. If you actually read the related articles at the time, and again, the author of the article was available during, I think it was about a 15-minute video conversation with a room with maybe a dozen or so people that attended the startup breakfast thing. So yeah, there's some nuance that is left out. If you simply look at the headline and say, yeah, we were ranked number one. It's the number one ranking among second tier localities. No, Silicon Valley and Austin, among others, were not included. And what do they deem pre-IPO activity? And why was it from a crowdfunding publication or a firm or whatever? But it's a good headline, and headlines get attention here in Vegas. That's what people pay attention to. We like shiny things here. And so it is. Similarly, our tables of ESO resources appear to be filled and filling in some blanks, checking off some boxes, if you will, without a deep dive into the actual value. Tech.Vegas, garbage. Startup.Vegas, Startup NV, same thing. Accelerate NV, all the different things that are actually the same. They're broken out to get some more lines, I suppose. It's interesting to focus on them. You know, you could have put some links to them. A lot of those things have websites. Tech.Vegas is a website. Startup.Vegas is a website. StartupNV.org is a website. So there could have been direct references to these platforms and services and what they offer. Not so much. And by the way, LVGEA being listed as one, their resource catalog and directory is ridiculous. Also not useful because they're not truly focused on startups, even though they did hire someone to oversee the ecosystem and entrepreneurial ecosystem development. The KPIs for that role are ridiculous. They are leaning far too heavily into tech startups. If you are not a tech startup that's going to become the next Google, then nobody, or OpenAI, I guess, nobody really cares. And that's unfortunate. And I hope it's actually not true. Checking off some boxes without actually looking at the actual value. I often describe this as checking the spare tire box on the to-do list before going on a road trip, but not checking to see if the tire is safe, properly inflated. It includes a jack and other tools to put it into use if you need it. Checking boxes is easy. What's behind those boxes? Do we have a startup scene, or do we have a useful and healthy and viable and fruitful startup scene? And I still don't like that term, but I think we're stuck with it. The recommendations section. And I will reemphasize again, this was not intended to be a deep dive into this report. Read the report, take from it what you will. This is episode 122 of the Cafe Genius Impresario's audio program, which has been focusing on all of this stuff for about 122 episodes. So I would like to think that I've kind of done some of this already. So don't believe that this is falling short because of the brevity of this episode. I didn't find anything too outlandish or exciting in the report, and it's pretty much what we expect. I don't want to go on and on, though. I have done that many times, as I just mentioned. Most definitely including my suggestions that we could lean into our positioning as a destination city. I think we're one of the top 5 city brands in the world. That might still be true. That information is also old. We could bolster our smart city footprint, making a smarter smart city for our 40 million or so visitors, 41.7 million in 2024, if the numbers are correct, showcasing a modern and even futuristic or aspirational smart city experience to our many visitors, enabling entrepreneurialism and innovation at a distance. Why not be a virtual part of our economy and visit Vegas when you can, when you want to, take a break with your family, but still make use of our infrastructure that enables and encourages entrepreneurialism and innovation. You can converge on the greater Vegas area as needed with your colleagues or related companies or whatever. Innovation sprints for the win. Fill those 155,000 or so hotel rooms with fun economy consumers. And when you don't, non-local innovators and entrepreneurs can use our platform, our innovation destination, and keep those rooms full either way. We know how to host 155,000 hotel rooms worth of people. Do we know how to host tech startups? I don't know. The usual capital and incentive stuff is in there, yes, in the report. Yes, there needs to be more money flowing, and yes, there needs to be more reason for business to operate within the state, within the Southern Nevada region even. The Hollywood 2.0 incentive legislation might be worth another look as to why it didn't work a second time for a second normal legislative session. Maybe the third time's a charm in 2 years. As these sorts of considerations are made about incentives and abatement programs and so on, they sometimes work, they sometimes don't. It's hard to say. How are you picking winners? I sort of like the idea of a place for founders, which had been brought up in one of our cohort members of the Genius Roundtable cohort that we had 2 years ago, 2023, in the form of hacker houses at the time. And this is a Silicon Valley thing, most definitely, hacker houses elsewhere as well. I would concur with some of the downtown project references to what was then drastically overpriced startup housing in the Ogden. So part of your deal might include an apartment in Ogden as part of the VTF investment and so on. I was never an invested startup, so I don't know the finer points, but I do know from anecdotes that people were living in the Ogden as part of their overall wager on whether their startup would be successful. Did VTF pay or not? I don't know, but the Ogden was fairly expensive. And then later in lower price digs and crash pads and so on. And then, of course, the efforts by incoming entrepreneurs, and I had been to these homes. There was Startup Row, the efforts to establish communities with proximal residential housing rentals and apartments and so on in other places nearby to bring people to the downtown area proximally so they could bump into each other, the serendipitous collision model. It's a nice idea. It's not a business model, but that's my opinion. Personally, I would like to see the Gold Spike, which was up for sale recently from the Shea family estate. It was up for sale recently, and it may still be for all I know. To convert all the way the desert or the Gold Spike, converted all the way from a hotel to a dorm-like startup housing resource, and go from there downtown. So you're proximal to fun activities, but you also bring startup people together. Hey, guess what? You're in the innovation district, or at least stumbling distance from it. I think locating people in the Southwest near the university has its upsides, but also has some downsides. Would you be near the Clark County Innovation District? I suppose. Great. What if they're not college students? Communication and what I've been calling discovery are both highlighted as well, and they're missing. The silo nature of the greater Vegas region, driven by insular groups and communities keeping to themselves, that missing innovation culture that would otherwise include some gravity, bringing together more personalities across verticals. In other words, unlike planets drawn together, big masses. Missing innovation culture, making the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem a topic worthy of inclusion on the front page of our local media, whether it's a real front page, so to speak, right? So websites, the existing or continuing television news, if there's a print magazine or newspaper. Generally speaking, we don't hear about that stuff if we're not desperately looking for it. You got to kill someone or build a stadium if you want to get attention here. Maybe within the presentation scope of our local population of content creators. The LVCVA, the Convention and Visitors Authority, pays some content creators to create Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts and whatnot, TikToks, about the fun economy, to go out there and showcase new restaurants, new pool events, new venues, new shows, new hidden speakeasies, and all that. Keep it fun. Fun economy. So our local media creators, content creators, and there's tons, they're doing the fun economy. Very little, if any, look at entrepreneurial ecosystem, startups, and so on. There may be a mention of some self-driving cars, which are mostly not developed here. So this is a great place to showcase technologies. And those 40 million or so people that are going to come here every year should be exposed to and enjoy those technologies in our showcase. Our smarter smart city could be making itself smarter with externally developed and locally developed innovations. And we can show and tell to our visitors. And then when they go home, they'll say, man, that Vegas is pretty smart. And they took all my money. So yeah, they spend most of their time on the outreach of the fun economy. I wish they would spend more time on the other stuff. Well, good for them, but there is an awful lot left on the table which could be put to use today. There are already people creating this content about the fun stuff. What if every single day there isn't something new to talk about, but there is a startup that nobody's talked about? There is a new startup resource, a co-work space, an event going on. And by the way, not all the events at that table are worth going to, but sometimes a meetup or a small gathering, a new group of 5 or 6 people getting together to work on something, an upcoming hackathon, the NASA Space Apps Challenge, which is not necessarily tech oriented. There's the U.S. Congressional Apps Challenge, which is tech oriented, the U.S. Congressional Art Competition, which is art, right? So there's a lot of people doing a lot of things that never get attention. We're not recognizing nor celebrating our local innovators. I wonder what impact that has. I've been speaking of this missing discovery element for years at this point, and it does in fact form one of the pillars of one of my own startup efforts, which I've talked about many times. And the My Muni initiative at Innovate for Vegas Foundation focuses in one aspect on the discovery element of any city. Why on earth is there not an open asset map at the very least, which is also on my to-do list? So there you go. That's my rundown on this report. The report itself, fairly generic. I didn't see anything that was earth-shattering. The recommendations, same, not earth-shattering. It's almost like there's a standard playbook and somebody just says, oh yeah, these are the missing elements. What I think should be done if you're going to do an assessment report like this, because this is really written as or I would take it as a sort of a celebration. Like, here's what we got. Come on down. What I would like to see is, here's what we want to aim for. And you can compare to other localities, and that's not completely unreasonable, but we can also look at what do we have? What do we think we actually need to take advantage of what we have? What are the paths to get to there? What do we need? And then what will that give us? And how do those pieces fit together to enable innovation where we may not be able to predict the future? 2-3 years ago, it was there was a literal chaos and mayhem here about the metaverse. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are still a big, huge thing here, and they have CryptoCon and whatnot. That's kind of a mess, unless you're looking to get scammed or you want to scam people, then more power to you. But I don't know that dictating innovation is going to work. Now, I was in Silicon Valley from 1993 to 2001, and then 2005 to 2013. I took a little break and went to Phoenix and ended up working remotely for Silicon Valley. Took a while. 9/11 kind of threw a wrench into a lot of things, but the take home, Silicon Valley had chip fabs. That's where it got the name from. But at no time did someone say, oh, you know what, we're really just focusing on chip fabs here. We're not doing app development. The internet, yeah, maybe you want to go somewhere else for that. No. So the notion that we need to build infrastructure with a particular direction in mind versus building a platform where the people doing stuff and innovating can determine what's needed and can maybe make do with the lead time to develop specific things or to take advantage of resources that are elsewhere. Do we have to be in a one-stop shop, all in one? Everything is here. You don't need to go anywhere else. We're a city that's built on the ability to get in and out and to have a room and to have some fun in our fun economy, to go back home wherever you came from and tell all your friends so that they'll come with you next time. That's what we do here. We should be taking advantage of that completely. And by the way, when you do that, you don't force the people making the fun economy happen out. You might actually have more job opportunities for them to come in. So there you go. That's all I know. And it's not much. What are we at here? Oh, under an hour and a half. That's good. It's been a while since I've done a long episode, so that was good. My voice is horrible. My apologies for that. Thanks for sticking with. And I'm going to leave it there for now. I hope you got something out of this. The report is not, neither of the reports I've referred to here today are awful. The people that have written them are not awful. The people that participated in any surveying or interviews or whatnot, they're fine. The problem is, if I may, when you are playing blackjack, for example, and if you're not counting cards, if you're just betting with your gut, you're not going to do as well. You know, you'll hit some wins here and there. But if you try to do optimal betting, maybe more easily with with fewer run-ins with big Italian characters, but if you can pursue an optimal betting strategy for craps, for example, if you know the gaps or the ways to take advantage of the rules or the situation or the physics involved, if you identify those things and you take advantage of them, you will do better. But if you just tell each other, hey, we're going to win at craps. Okay, yeah, we're going to win at craps. Okay, I'm going to post it on LinkedIn and I'm going to get a bunch of likes and it's going to be awesome. Oh, we did not win at craps. But if you understand the payoffs, if you understand the probabilities, if you understand, don't put the hard bets on there. Don't do the place bets. Don't do the, what is it? You want to place bets. You don't want to do the, totally spacing on the name. You want to place the pass and come line bets. You don't want to do the field bets, right? So you want to optimize. You want to figure out what's working, what doesn't. How does this system work? We need to spend more time working on or understanding how the system works. What do we have? What is our ecosystem capable of? What is our climax community? 100+ years ago, it was a desert. They built Las Vegas on it. So it took a while. It didn't take a year. Okay, it didn't take 100 years, but it didn't take a year to build some buildings. But in order to make comfortable visitation, airport, water accessibility, cooling, there's not a lot of transportation for food and water to get here. So they had to make sure there were supply chains. The whole 9 yards to make Vegas what it is today. It took a while, right? You don't wake up one morning and say, let's turn this into Silicon Valley. That's just not going to happen. And no matter how many posts you see on LinkedIn to the contrary, it's not going to happen. We can make do with what we have. We can make it better. We could be optimized. We can know the optimal betting scheme, if you like, and do better with what we have. And part of that is, yes, of course, improving our educational alignment with the notion of being an innovation economy, or at least an innovation hub. I like innovation destination, but if you're already here, then you can just be a local innovator. We need to recognize and celebrate that more so that people know that it's an option. I cannot tell you how disappointing it is when I was speaking to Rama Venkat at UNLV 10 years ago. I said, there really should be a clinic program here. We had that at Harvey Mudd College. And he said, I totally know what that is. Yeah, we should do that. He said, it's really hard to get engineering students, for example, to stay in a 4 or usually 5-year program when they can just go right up the street and get a job as a valet for 6 figures, which was true at the time. I don't know if that's still as true. So yeah, why not? Why just go and be a dealer, be a DJ, do valet, do whatever. You can make good money, tips. The tipping economy is strong, etc. So if you want to build a culture of innovation, if you want to bolster our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, it takes more than just talking about it. And you cannot sprinkle money on the top like it's a dessert topping. There has to be real, I don't mean financial, I mean blood, sweat, and tears investment and a true culture shift over time, emergent, where people may begin to say, oh, you mean if I have an idea and I pursue it, I should actually pursue it and not just talk about it. And I could help other people, and that will come back to me later in the long tail model. That's been proven time and time again. I should respond to emails, and there's a whole number of cultural adjustments that could be made in the near term. And over time, those will catch on, and the shift will take place over time, and an emergent innovation culture may appear. May. And if not, there will still be pockets of innovation culture. And the silo is real in the greater Vegas area. That is another thing to address. Reaching across the aisles between the silos. It takes one or two people to get one or two more people. They can tell two friends, and so on and so on. Hey, that should be a shampoo commercial. So yeah, that's okay. Now we're going to end it because my voice is really arguing with me right now. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I hope some of this was useful. I would very much like to see some of the things I've been talking about for years now come to fruition, some through my own efforts, some through some collaborations. Man, those collaborations are hard to come by. People got to start responding to emails. That would be nice. So on that note, thank you. Have a great weekend. If you're listening to this on a Friday or any day, you can have a great weekend whenever you want. It's as at most 5 days away. Take care.